Fans were thrown out of NBA arenas for publicly displaying their support and waving banners on behalf of Hong Kong's pro-democracy dissidents. At the start of the 2019 season, one of the league's executives, Daryl Morey, the general manager of the Houston Rockets, the same team that Yao Ming began on in the early 2000s, tweeted in support of Hong Kong pro-democracy activists. NBA superstar James Harden said, "We apologize, we love China." The NBA called Morey's comments regrettable and said that he deeply offended many of our friends and fans in China. But it was LeBron James who came after Morey to warn him against tweeting about things that he wasn't, as James put it, educated about. The question is, what wasn't Daryl Morey educated about that somehow LeBron James knew about? James was precisely clear about his issue with Morey's tweet.
He spoke, and so many people could have been harmed, not only financially, but physically, emotionally, spiritually. So just be careful what we tweet and we say and what we do, even though, yes, we do have freedom of speech, but there can be a lot of negative that comes with that too.
He talked about people getting hurt financially. He's talking not only about the NBA and franchise owners, he's also describing LeBron James's own situation. The cost here is financial. It's not just about James's NBA salary. It's also about his years-long sponsorship deals with Nike and Coca-Cola. These companies were two of the major US corporations that lobbied against American legislation that sought to keep US companies out of China's Uyghur regions. It was in that area that forced labor is rampant across the CCP's detention camps. Both Nike and Coke argued to protect US corporate access to those regions. The number one carrier of China's message is LeBron James, now the NBA's top superstar. What's more convincing, a face that everyone knows like LeBron James, or a Chinese Communist Party official promoting the party to American viewers? Ideally, you would want to have an American megastar pushing your own interest on American audiences. Many goods used in the NBA are allegedly made in Uyghur detention camps, like many of the clothing items that the NBA and league franchises are making billions of dollars off of. But both the CCP and American corporations, including the NBA, are hiding behind LeBron James and his advocacy of political causes here at home in America, where he sows discord and distrust of law enforcement. On the one hand, James and the NBA are supporters of so-called important domestic causes in the United States. And yet on the other, they're covering for the CCP police state. This is not a contradiction, it's misdirection. It's purposeful. They're deflecting their guilt from profiting off of crimes against humanity. They're using social justice messaging to obscure the fact that they're making money from the vicious depredations, from the cruelties that the Chinese Communist Party visits on its own people. And this is appalling. How is it possible that a man who talks about distrusting the police and fighting against American law enforcement abuses is nonetheless a pitchman for a Chinese police state that imprisons, tortures, and executes dissidents across China? We talk about the relationship between the NBA and the CCP as though it were a partnership. In fact, what really happens is that the Americans wind up serving Chinese interests. The Chinese become American clients of American spokesmen like LeBron James. Because insofar as James's money is coming from China, coming from Beijing, and James depends on this source of income, then in defending his own financial interest, he is therefore defending Chinese interests as well. Whether the party even had to tell them to throw pro-Hong Kong demonstrators out of NBA arenas is irrelevant. The NBA and many of its top stars came to understand why they were rich, why they were fabulously rich, and why they were doing so well. That required them to protect China. This is a constant we see across the board with the China class. Their own interests are so deeply tied to Chinese Communist Party interests to defend themselves, to defend their own power, wealth, and prestige. The American elites would have no choice but to defend China. They knew that none of these people were going to turn against their own money, their own bank accounts, and start coming after China. It's important to remember, again, that Americans do not understand sports in the same way Chinese Communist Party officials do.